Hey, Grandma, are your potatoes ready? Yep, they turned out delicious again this year. I've got plenty, so feel free to share some with your friends. Awesome, Grandma. Everyone loves your potatoes. They'll be thrilled. Kyle, my grandson, cheerfully ran off with a grin. He's a sixth grader who loves soccer. I'm Bella, 65 years old. I lost my husband to illness 3 years ago, but he left me enough to live comfortably on survivor benefits. My only child is my son Clive, who's 40, happily married to Lizzie and the father of young Kyle. Right now, I live alone in the apartment unit my late husband left behind. Clive and his family live next door in the same 8-unit building. We're close enough that we often share meals, making it feel like a multi-generational home. Lizzie is from Montana and has a strong sense of local pride. Being from Idaho, I can't help but feel like a rival in her eyes, and she's always trying to one-up me. My son Clive just laughs at our antics, often saying, "You two are at it again, huh?" We were a pretty normal family until a big issue arose regarding where Kyle should go for middle school. Lizzie, possibly influenced by others, wanted to enroll him in a prestigious private school. Sure, it could set him up for a top high school and college, but Kyle wanted to attend a school known for its soccer program. I wanted to respect his wishes, but Clive felt torn between Lizzie and me. One evening during dinner, Lizzie had prepared Montana-raised buffalo meat, staying true to her roots. I couldn't resist teasing. "I prefer Idaho steak, you know." "Oh, just regular beef steak," Lizzie shot back. "You're from Idaho, so of course you'd say that. What else is there in Idaho besides potatoes?" "Excuse me? Montana's got nothing but buffalo and elk." "Don't act like you're better," I replied, laughing. Clive, acting as the referee, jumped in. "Can you two cut it out? Why does it always turn into a my state's better than your state argument every time you meet?" Even our grandson Kyle chimed in, supporting both sides with his adorable smile. It's hard to believe he was born from someone as ridiculous as Lizzie. And then came the usual catchphrase at the end, "Raised on nothing but Idaho potatoes." As the dinner continued, Lizzie and I ate in silence while Clive chatted with Kyle. "So what's going on lately? You're graduating elementary school soon. Got any plans for middle school?" Clive asked. "Yeah, I'll probably go to the local middle school, but the class president, Tavan, is going to a private middle school in the city," Kyle replied. "You can go to a private school if you want," Clive suggested. "I'd rather go to a school that's good at soccer," Kyle admitted. Lizzie's eyes sparkled as she said, "Don't aim for being a jock. Focus on your studies, get into a good college, and become a senior-level government official. You'll have a stable income, and I can rest easy." "But I want to be a Major League Soccer player," Kyle protested. "Oh, a soccer player, huh?" I chimed in. "Most athletes retire before they're 40. A stable government job is way better than gambling on a sports career." "But I really love soccer. I want to play in middle and high school, whether I turn pro or not," Kyle insisted. "Forget about that. You should be aiming for a prestigious private middle school. You'll be on the right track to an elite life," Lizzie argued. Clive, starting to agree with Lizzie, added, "I get it. Stability is valuable these days." I knew I had to hold the fort for Kyle. "What's important is how Kyle feels, and we should respect that," I said. "So you're saying it's okay if Kyle doesn't go to college?" Lizzie shot back. "It's only natural for parents to want their child to go to college, right? So Grandma, maybe you shouldn't interfere too much with our decisions." Clive stepped in again. "We're responsible for Kyle's future. So Mom, we'll consider your opinion, but don't push too hard." Oh my, it seemed like a win for Lizzie. But the silver lining was when Kyle said to me, "Grandma, you really do think about me, don't you? Thanks so much." I felt like crying when I heard those words from my grandson. Darn it, I couldn't back down now. I thought as I bit into the slightly overcooked and charred buffalo meat, muttering to myself, you got this, like a mantra. But from that day on, Lizzie's behavior changed abruptly. Kyle stopped coming to my room to hang out, and Lizzie forbade him from entering. Soon after, Kyle began attending more after-school tutoring sessions at a cram school that specialized in preparing kids for private middle schools. Naturally, this wasn't cheap. Clive had gone to a decent college and worked at an okay company, but he hadn't climbed the corporate ladder due to his timid personality. Their income was average, and while we didn't have to worry much about housing expenses, sending Kyle to a private school would be a stretch. I could sense that they were planning to have me foot the bill. I mean, we're stretched thin as it is. If you care about your grandson, maybe you can help us out. Lizzie was bound to say that sooner or later. Then one day, Lizzie came into my room holding some snacks. The afternoon was drifting by, but there was definitely tension in the air. As I crunched on one of the cookies she brought, Lizzie started. So about Kyle. What about him? You told me not to interfere, remember? I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Yes, but private middle school is expensive. Clive's salary won't cover it, Lizzie said, her voice strained. We went back and forth, each trying to maintain the upper hand. This isn't new information, Lizzie. You knew this already. What's going on? You're college educated, aren't you? I confronted her, fully prepared for a showdown. True, but times are tough. The cost of living keeps rising. I might need to find part-time work, Lizzie replied, her tone uncertain. Was she trying to bluff? I wondered. Well, you're young, Lizzie. Kyle is growing up. Maybe it's good for you to go out and work. I tried to counter bluff. But a part-time job won't bring in much money. I want something more stable, Lizzie retorted, frustration creeping into her voice. I had enough of the beating around the bush. So what if we use the income from this apartment to cover Kyle's tuition? I asked directly. Why are you discussing this with me? Isn't this something your own family should discuss? I responded, my voice tinged with disbelief. That's when I saw a glint in Lizzie's eyes. What if we rent out your room, Bella? Then we could use that extra rent to help pay for Kyle's school, she suggested. You want me to leave? Does Clive agree with this? I felt like my breath had been taken away. You have a pension, Bella. You're doing fine, so if you agree to cover Kyle's tuition, you can stay. Otherwise, we'll need you to move, she said, her voice cold. This is so sudden. What do you expect me to do? I stammered, struggling to process her words. Don't you love Kyle? Think about his future. It's either you leave or help with the expenses. We need an answer soon. Kyle's exams have already started, Lizzie added before leaving my room with a triumphant look on her face. Once she was gone, I remembered how to breathe again. I loved my grandson Kyle, of course. I wasn't neglecting the issue at all. When I thought about it being for my grandson, Lizzie's perspective did somewhat make sense. Still, I'm not someone who just nods along easily. I pondered what the best course of action would be. Kyle was about to hit adolescence, and I'd noticed he had been acting a certain way around his childhood friend, Vicky. I'll use Vicky as bait to see what happens, I thought. One day, I came across Vicky and Lizzie chatting in the park. Lizzie was doing most of the talking, with Vicky just nodding from time to time. Finally, it seemed like they had a real conversation, and Lizzie left with a smile, patting Vicky on the head. I approached Vicky after Lizzie had walked away. Vicky, oh, Kyle's grandma. Hi there. Vicky's face lit up when she saw me. It's been a while. With graduation coming up for you, you must be busy, huh? I asked. Yeah. Kyle's mom just suggested that maybe I should go to the same school as Kyle, Vicky replied. Really? Well, Kyle hasn't made up his mind yet. He's so indecisive, I said, testing the waters. Really? Kyle's mom said he's set to go to the prestigious Phillips Academy. She thinks I should go there too, Vicky shared, her voice filled with uncertainty. So Lizzie and I have the same opinion, I mused. Do you want to go to the same school as Kyle? I asked. If I can, I would love to go to the same school. But I'm not as smart as Kyle, Vicky admitted, looking down. The innocent heart of a young girl. I remember feeling the same way at her age. Kyle hasn't decided on Phillips Academy. He's more into soccer. My guess is he'll probably opt for Noble and Greenway School, I told her. Really? If it's that school, I might stand a chance. Vicky's eyes sparkled with hope. Yes, Grandma doesn't lie, I assured her. Vicky looked down again. But Kyle's mom told me that if I get into Phillips Academy, it would make Kyle happy, so I should try my best. No, it's the other way around, I said gently. Lizzie wants to use you to get Kyle into a prestigious school. Kyle likes you, so Lizzie thinks if you go there, it'll motivate him. Kyle likes me, is that true? Vicky blushed at my words, her face glowing with excitement. The purity of youth. It reminds me of my own teenage years, I thought. He doesn't hold my hand anymore. He's been mean, doing things like throwing balls at me and pulling my hair. Vicky confessed. Well, that's how you know he likes you. Boys his age are basically silly. They can't say they like you, so they act mean to get attention, I explained, smiling. Really? Vicky asked, her eyes wide with disbelief. Yes, really. At your age, girls mature faster than boys, so while you're growing up, the boys are still kids. I've had similar experiences when I was your age, I assured her. I see, so when Kyle is mean to me, I should just smile and say, "You're such a kid." Huh? Vicky asked, a small smile forming on her lips. He'll start being nicer once he knows you won't react to his teasing, I added. Okay, thanks, Grandma. Vicky beamed at me. You're welcome. Thank you for caring about Kyle. I think you two will be together for a long time, I said warmly. Then, bending down to whisper in Vicky's ear, I added, and besides, Grandma would be delighted if you became Kyle's wife. Vicky's face turned even redder as she stammered, No, wait. Maggie. But well, you're going to turn out to be a wonderful woman, Vicky. Mark my words, I said, smiling at her. Thanks, Grandma. Vicky waved her hand and headed home. Watching her leave made me feel nostalgic, even though I was 65. Later, during dinner, Lizzie brought up the subject again. So Kyle, it seems Vicky might be going to Phillips Academy too. Maybe you should consider it if she's going, Lizzie hinted at Kyle. It doesn't matter. She can do whatever she wants, Kyle replied, not looking up from his plate. You like Vicky, don't you? Wouldn't it be nice to go to the same school? Lizzie persisted. I don't like her. She's annoying, Kyle shot back. Really? You both said you'd get married back in kindergarten. Why not go to the same middle school? Lizzie pushed, a bit too eagerly. What are you talking about? That was just child's play. You're crazy, Mom. Kyle exclaimed, frustration creeping into his voice. Don't you think Vicky's parents would be happy? You two have been together since kindergarten. Lizzie continued, undeterred. Are we talking about marriage or middle school? Kyle asked, clearly exasperated. Both. I would be happy to, Lizzie responded, her tone softening. Kyle was firm. I have dreams for the future, and I want to go to a prestigious school known for soccer. Lizzie's voice grew anxious. Well, that worries me. My life, my choice. My dream is to win the World Cup, Kyle declared, his voice full of determination. That's so unrealistic. Only a few become pros. Lizzie retorted, her voice rising. So following your logic, I'd definitely be happy. You're deciding my life for me? No thanks, Kyle shot back, crossing his arms. How could you say that? I'm only thinking about your well-being, Lizzie said, her voice quivering. Then support my dream. I want you to root for me, Kyle replied, his voice softer but still resolute. In response to Kyle's feelings, I decided to step in. I'll support you, Kyle. You learned to kick a ball before you could throw one. You can totally be a soccer player. Thanks, Grandma, Kyle said, smiling for the first time during the conversation. Don't forget to focus on your studies. Soccer isn't just physical. Clive joined in, offering his support. I will. I have to speak Spanish if I want to play overseas, Kyle replied, his excitement returning. How wonderful, my dear grandson. I beamed at him. In the midst of this lively discussion, only Lizzie was mumbling something under her breath. Kyle then mentioned something interesting. Vicky recently developed an interest in soccer. How amazing. If he joined the U.S. men's national team and Vicky the women's, I thought, amused by the idea. Just as I was lost in this thought, Lizzie came into my room. Bella, it's about Kyle, Lizzie started, her voice tense. What happened? I asked, already weary of where this conversation might lead. It's about the tuition for his private middle school. We talked about this before, remember? Lizzie said, her voice growing more assertive. I told you no. You and Clive can pay for it. Maybe get a part-time job, I responded firmly. Lizzie looked distressed. I'm emotionally fragile, so dealing with workplace relationships would probably make me sick. I doubt I could handle a job. What was she talking about? She's thick-skinned enough to aim for my savings, I thought to myself, growing more irritated. So it's pretty much down to two options here. Either you pay, or we move out to increase the rent income. Lizzie declared, her tone sharp. I'm sorry, but it's a parent's job to take care of their child. You both are parents, and you can't even raise one kid. You're failing as parents, I said, not holding back. If you have time to say that, then I'd like you to leave this room, Lizzie shot back, her patience clearly wearing thin. Bella, You have enough assets to live comfortably even if you move out, right? Why don't you consider a senior home? I'm not going to take care of you. Don't worry, I never planned on asking you anyway, I replied, keeping my voice calm. I thought you'd say that, so I've already made arrangements, Lizzie said, pulling out a stack of brochures from her bag. Arrangements? I asked, my curiosity piqued. Lizzie then placed the brochures on the table. These are nursing home brochures. Pick one and move out, will you? I'm sorry, but I have no plans to move, I replied, my voice steady. Don't you care about your grandchild? Lizzie asked, her tone accusatory. I'm here because I do care about my grandchild. Kyle is a good kid. He appreciates me and loves the roasted potatoes I make, I said, my voice softening as I thought of Kyle. It's because he eats those potatoes all the time that he thinks Idaho is some backwater place, Lizzie snapped. Says someone from Montana, where they only have buffalo. I countered, unable to resist the jab. Just then, we heard Kyle's voice. Grandma, I'm home, he called out. Kyle had returned home at the perfect moment. Ah, Kyle, welcome home. Lizzie, still irritated, asked, Why do you go to Grandma's instead of coming home? Because you don't give me snacks, but Grandma gives me roast potatoes, Kyle replied, completely unaware of the tension in the room. Gosh dang it, Lizzie muttered under her breath, clearly frustrated. I couldn't help but smile as I smugly served some roasted potatoes. Here you go, I made some today too. This is it. Even my friends say Idaho potatoes are a great snack. They're sweet, filling, and good for you, Kyle said, enjoying the food. Yep, they're rich in dietary fiber. They help strengthen your stomach so you can enjoy all kinds of food, I added, feeling proud. Oh, no wonder I enjoy Mom's food more. It's not that she got better at cooking, Kyle said innocently, making Lizzie bristle. Gosh dang it, Lizzie muttered again. Go on, Kyle, keep it up, I encouraged him. Lizzie, clearly at her wits' end, said, Anyway, I'll discuss this matter with my husband, so please have a decision by next time. With that, she stormed out of the room. Then, one day, I saw Kyle and Vicky at the park. Kyle was teaching Vicky how to play soccer, both of them chasing the ball with smiles on their faces. Lizzie suddenly appeared and approached me. She looked mad, as if she was snorting angrily. Bella, where have you been? She demanded. Just out shopping. Why? I replied, sensing trouble. Please be prepared for an important conversation after dinner tonight, Lizzie said, her voice tight with barely contained anger. Okay, I said, watching her leave, even angrier than before. I was dumbfounded by her sudden rage. Kyle and Vicky then came over. What happened? Are you fighting with Mom again? Kyle asked, concerned. Well, it shows how close we are, I said, trying to downplay the situation. I think she wants to talk about your future, Kyle. So what do you really want to do? I asked, genuinely curious about his aspirations. After thinking about it, Kyle finally made up his mind. I'd like to go to Noble and Greenway School. All right, I said, smiling warmly. Leave it to Grandma. You'll make it to the U.S. men's team for sure. Vicky, who had been listening intently, chimed in with encouragement. And I'll make it onto the U.S. women's team. You could definitely make it, Kyle. Kyle smiled but teased her gently. You still have a long way to go though, Vicky. That's why I'm going to practice a lot. I'm even thinking about going to Noble and Greenway Middle School, Vicky replied, her determination shining through. Me too. It'd be great if we could go there together. Kyle agreed, though his voice held a hint of uncertainty. I couldn't help but chuckle at the exchange. Come on, kiddo, you're a bit dense. Get a clue about Vicky's feelings, I thought to myself. Then I said aloud, Anyway, dinner's almost ready. How about we call it a day? Okay, Vicky said with a smile. All right then, Kyle's grandma. Goodbye. Vicky waved as she headed home. That evening, after a mostly silent dinner, Lizzie finally broached the subject that had been hanging in the air. So Bella, you said you'd support Kyle. What does that mean exactly? Talk is cheap, Well, firstly, getting him the soccer gear he needs, I began. And I guess Kyle wants to go to Noble and Greenway School. It's a private school, so it's going to cost quite a bit. Lizzie seemed to be processing my words, and I felt a bit relieved when she responded, If you're supporting him, then the least you could do is help with tuition. So I'll just say it. Please move out. Excuse me? I exclaimed, taken aback. Lizzie pressed on, her voice growing more assertive. The owner of this apartment is your son Clive, right? Which means we have the right to tell tenants to leave. I can't tolerate your interference in our lives anymore, Bella. Really? You sure you want to say that to me? What's gotten into you, acting all tough? I asked, trying to rein in my frustration, but it was time to stop Lizzie's nonsense. Are you really saying all this for Kyle? Weren't you losing the mom rivalry at his elementary school? Getting jealous that a rival mom's kid is going to a top private middle school. So now you're pushing Kyle to go to Phillips Academy. Lizzie's face flushed as I continued. Plus, I've heard you've been overspending on clothes, jewelry, lunches, and parties. So you're short on money and want me to cover tuition, right? Gosh dang it, Lizzie muttered, clearly agitated. I heard you've been secretly using credit cards, even borrowing from sketchy sources to make the payments, I added, my voice firm. How did you? Lizzie stammered, her composure slipping. Just like you have mom friends, I have grandma friends. We gossip about our daughters-in-law and sons. And let's just say I'm the boss grandma around here. News travels fast in this neighborhood. Don't underestimate seniors. We can use smartphones too, you know. Lizzie's frustration was palpable as she muttered again. Gosh dang it. What's the big deal? Clive inherited from Grandpa, and he owns this apartment. A little reckless spending won't hurt us. Lizzie shot back, trying to regain control. Just then, Kyle spoke up. Hold on, Mom. You're mistaken. Kyle. Lizzie looked surprised. I could hear you because you were arguing so loudly while I was trying to study, Kyle said, sitting down and crossing his legs, looking quite exasperated. What is he, an old man? I thought, amused by his serious demeanor. What's this mistake you're talking about? Kids shouldn't interfere in adult conversations, Lizzie scolded him. But you're fighting about me, right? I'm involved, so I should get a say. Kyle countered, his voice steady. Don't you talk back to me, Lizzie snapped, but Kyle remained calm. All right, he said, placating her. But Mom, you've got it wrong on several fronts. What are you talking about? What's wrong? Lizzie asked, her voice faltering. Listen, Dad isn't the landlord of this apartment. The landlord is Grandma. Dad told me. That's how I know. Kyle explained. Seriously. Lizzie's face drained of color. And Dad knows about the money issue too. He said we'll be out of credit soon, Kyle added. Oh, that's a problem, Lizzie muttered, her panic growing. Exactly. So there it is. I always knew you were bad with money. But I didn't expect you to be in debt, Kyle said bluntly. At that moment, Clive walked in looking somber. Yes, Mom told me all about it recently. After a lot of thought, this is what I've decided, he said, handing over divorce papers. Lizzie stared at the papers, her face pale. I can't live with you anymore. I don't want Kyle around a mother who's using him to keep up appearances. Both Kyle and my mom agree. I don't want to be with someone who sees me as just a tool either. I'm good as long as I have Grandma and Dad, Clive said, his voice resolute. Hearing this from her husband and child, Lizzie hung her head, speechless. So we're getting a divorce. I'll split the assets fairly, but I can't cover the debt you've accumulated. That's on you, Clive continued. But as for the inheritance from my father, I won't get much since Mom is still alive. And don't you dare shatter Kyle's dreams for the sake of your ego. A parent's job is to push their children forward, not hold them back. Bam. Decision made. Lizzie sat down as if the wind had been knocked out of her. A while later, the divorce became official, and Lizzie moved out of the apartment. She's reportedly working in a factory in Idaho to pay back a suspicious loan. She's broke and surviving on potatoes. Karma is real. She's being saved by the Idaho potatoes she once mocked. When fall came around, Kyle started school at Noble and Greenway, just as he had hoped. Kyle, who had been a soccer star since elementary school, was welcomed warmly. Vicky also made it into the same school. Congratulations on getting in, Vicky. It's great you'll be at the same school as Kyle, I said, genuinely happy for her. Thank you. Because you encouraged me, I was able to work hard. Thank you so much, Vicky replied, her gratitude evident. You did it because you worked hard. So are you joining the girls' soccer team? I asked. No, it seems a bit much for me, but I plan on becoming the boys' team manager, Vicky answered, her voice shy but excited. Well, that sounds good too. Please take care of Kyle, I said, feeling a sense of pride. Yes, of course, Vicky said, blushing as she looked down. Ah, the beginning of their teenage years. Hey, Vicky, let's go sign up for the soccer club. Kyle called out. Coming, Vicky replied, hugging me quickly before running off. Well, Kyle, you go chase your dreams. I hope you'll win the World Cup while I'm still around. That way, I can brag about you to Grandpa, I thought as I watched them go, feeling a deep sense of contentment. I never imagined that the person I trusted the most would betray me in the most unimaginable way. I was 32 when the truth came crashing down on me. My sister, the one I grew up with, sharing secrets and dreams, had committed the ultimate betrayal. It was a chilly autumn evening when I stumbled upon the truth. William, my then fiancé, had left his phone on the kitchen counter. A message popped up, glaring at me with harsh reality. It was from my sister. The message was clearly not meant for a brother-in-law. My heart sank as I read the words. I miss you. I can't wait for our little family to be complete. Confronting William was a blur of tears and disbelief. Why her? Why my sister? I remember asking, my voice trembling. William couldn't meet my highs. It just happened. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you, he muttered. His apology sounded hollow, a feeble attempt to mend a wound too deep. The pain was unbearable, but what came next was even worse. It was a confrontation I had dreaded but couldn't avoid. I went to my sister's house, my mind swirling with anger and hurt. The door opened, and there she stood, her eyes betraying a flicker of guilt. Is it true? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She sighed, looking down at her swollen belly. Yes, it's true. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice laced with remorse that did little to soothe my pain. Sorry? You destroy my life, and all you can say is sorry. I couldn't contain the bitterness in my voice. She reached out, but I recoiled. Please understand, it wasn't planned. I never meant to fall for William, she pleaded. But you did, and now you're carrying his child. Another one, I said, the reality sinking in. The conversation that followed was a blur of tears, excuses, and apologies, none of which could undo the betrayal. I left her house with a heavy heart, knowing that our relationship could never be the same again. I had lost not just my fiancé, but my sister too. In that moment, I made a decision. I would cut her out of my life completely. The weeks following the revelation were the hardest of my life. The betrayal left a gaping hole in my heart, one that seemed impossible to heal. I was engulfed by a mixture of anger, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of loss. It wasn't just about losing William, it was the profound betrayal by my sister that cut the deepest. I remember the day I decided to cut ties. It was a decision that felt both heartbreaking and necessary. My family had gathered at our parents' house, a place that once felt like a sanctuary of warmth and love, now tainted by the betrayal. My mother approached me cautiously, her eyes filled with worry. Honey, I know you're hurt, but she's still your sister. Maybe with time. I cut her off, the bitterness evident in my voice. No, Mom, there's no maybe here. She's not my sister anymore, not after what she's done. My father, usually a man of few words, placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. We understand your pain, but she's family. Family sticks together, he said softly. I shook my head, tears brimming in my eyes. Family doesn't do what she did. She made her choice, and now I'm making mine. I can't. I won't have her in my life anymore, I stated firmly. My parents exchanged a sorrowful glance, the weight of my words hanging heavily in the air. I stood up, feeling the need to assert my decision further. I expect everyone to respect my choice. I don't want to hear about her. I don't want to see her, and I certainly don't want her to be a part of my life in any way. My mother reached out, her voice trembling. But she's your sister, she interjected. I interrupted, a firm resolve in my tone. She was my sister. She's nothing to me now. The room fell silent, the finality of my words settling like dust. I walked out of that room knowing I had closed a significant chapter of my life. It was more painful for my family to witness this rift, but for me, it was a necessary step to move forward. As I drove away from the house that day, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I was leaving behind a part of my life, a part of who I was, but I knew deep down it was the only way to heal, to rebuild myself from the ashes of betrayal. 2 years had passed since the day I decided to sever ties with my sister. Life, as it tends to, moved on in its unpredictable rhythm, leading me to paths I never imagined I would tread. Among these was meeting James, the man who would eventually become my husband. James and I met at a mutual friend's party. I wasn't keen on attending, still nursing the wounds of my past, but something about that evening felt different. It was there, amidst laughter and casual chatter, that I saw James for the first time. He had a kind smile and eyes that seemed to understand the world in a way few did. We hit it off instantly, talking for hours. It was during one of our deep conversations that I decided to open up about my past. I had a pretty rough breakup, I started hesitantly. My ex-fiancé and my sister, they betrayed me in the worst way possible. James listened intently, his expression one of understanding rather than pity. I know something about betrayal myself, he shared. My brother, believe it or not, had a habit of getting involved with my exes. I guess some siblings just don't understand boundaries. There was comfort in finding someone who understood the pain and complexity of such betrayals. Our shared experiences drew us closer, and before we knew it, we were inseparable. Our relationship blossomed into something beautiful and solid. When James proposed, it was under a sky full of stars, at the very spot where we had met. "You've brought light into my life in ways you can't imagine," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Will you marry me?" Tears of joy rolled down my cheeks as I nodded, whispering, "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Our wedding was a small, intimate affair, surrounded by those who truly mattered. As I walked down the aisle, my heart felt lighter than it had in years. The pain of the past was still there, but it was overshadowed by the hope of a new beginning. James and I soon started a family, welcoming 3 beautiful children into our lives. They were a constant source of joy and laughter, filling our home with love and warmth. In those moments, holding my children or looking into James's loving eyes, I realized how far I had come. The betrayal that had once seemed like the end of my world was now just a distant memory. It had led me to this new life, a life filled with love, trust, and happiness. I once thought I had lost everything forever. Life with James and our children was blissful, a stark contrast to the turmoil of my past. However, the world outside our little haven continued to spin, and with it came news of my sister and William that I couldn't avoid. One evening, as James and I were putting the kids to bed, he mentioned, "I heard something about William today. He had an accident at work. Quite serious, I believe." I paused, a complex mix of emotions bubbling inside me. "Oh, and how did you hear about this?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Mike from the office. You remember him, right? He's William's colleague," James explained. "And my sister?" The words left my lips before I could stop them. Part of me didn't want to know, but another part, the part that still remembered her as my sister, cared despite everything. "She's struggling, to say the least. With William's disability and her own health issues, things aren't looking great for them," James said gently, understanding the weight of his words. I sighed deeply, feeling conflicted. "Thank you for telling me, James." The news of their hardship stirred something in me. Despite the pain and betrayal, I couldn't completely erase the fact that she was once my sister, someone I loved and cared for. But the wound was still there, a reminder of the line she'd crossed. A few days later, my mother called. I could sense the hesitance in her voice. "Dear, I know you don't want to hear about her, but your sister is in a bad place right now. With William's condition, they're struggling to even feed the girls," Mom said softly. I felt a tug at my heart, thinking of the innocent children caught in the middle of this mess. "I need to think about this, Mom. I can't promise anything," I replied. After the call, I sat down with James, pouring out my conflicted thoughts. "They're innocent in all this, James, the kids, but helping them means opening a door I've closed a long time ago." James took my hand, offering a comforting squeeze. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. But remember, you don't owe them anything. Your first responsibility is to yourself and to our family." His words were a balm, a reminder of the new life I had built, a life far removed from the shadows of my past. I lay awake that night, pondering over a decision that felt impossible to make. My heart ached for the children, but was it enough to risk the peace I had fought so hard to find? The dilemma of whether to help my sister and her family weighed heavily on me. James noticed my unrest and often asked if I was all right, but I found it hard to articulate the storm brewing within. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, the phone rang. It was my father this time, his voice weary, a tone I wasn't accustomed to hearing from him. "Your sister and William are in a tight spot. They asked if we could take in the girls for a while," he said. I felt a knot form in my stomach. And what did you say? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. We're considering it, but they also asked if you and James might help, he replied. I was silent for a moment, digesting his words. Dad, I don't think I can do that, I finally said. There was a pause on the other end. I understand, but they are just kids. They shouldn't suffer for their parents' mistakes, he said gently. I know, Dad. I know, but it's not just about the kids. It's everything she did. Everything she took from me, I replied, my voice strained with emotion. We just thought, maybe for the sake of family, he began. Dad, some wounds are too deep. I'm sorry. I can't, I said, hanging up the phone, feeling a mix of frustration and guilt. James reached across the table, covering my hand with his. It's okay to say no. You've been through a lot, he said softly. I nodded, grateful for his support, but still tormented by the decision. A few days later, my sister reached out directly, a message appearing on my social media. Her words were desperate. I know what happened between us, but I need you. The girls need you. We're family, after all. I stared at the screen, her words echoing in my mind. Family. That word had lost its meaning when she betrayed me. I replied, my fingers typing with a resolve that surprised even me. What we had as family ended a long time ago. I'm sorry, but I can't help you. She responded quickly, a hint of bitterness in her words. How can you be so cold? They're just kids, and they have their parents and grandparents. I have my own family to think about. I wrote back, my heart racing with a cocktail of emotions. The exchange left me drained. It was one thing to say no to my parents, but quite another to deny my sister directly. Yet I knew in my heart it was the right decision. My loyalty was to the family I had built, the family that stood by me when my world fell apart. That night, as I tucked my children into bed, their innocent faces a stark contrast to the complexity of the adult world, I knew I had made the right choice. My duty was to protect them, to ensure their world remained unscathed by the shadows of my past. Despite my clear message on social media, my sister refused to take no for an answer. A few days later, she tried to contact me again, this time through a more direct approach. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I heard the familiar tone of an incoming video call. Hesitantly, I accepted the call, and there she was, my sister, her face worn with stress and worry. Please, I'm begging you. We're at our wits' end here. William can barely move, and I'm struggling to keep up with everything, she pleaded, her voice cracking with desperation. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I told you already, I can't help you. I'm sorry. But we're sisters, she insisted, tears welling up in her eyes. Remember how we used to dream of our future together? How we promised to always be there for each other? That was a long time ago, before you made your choice, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. She was silent for a moment, then said, It's not just about us anymore. It's about the girls. Don't they deserve a chance? I felt a pang of sympathy, but it was quickly overshadowed by the memories of betrayal. They do deserve a chance, but not at the cost of my family's peace. You have other people who can help. She sobbed openly now, her face a portrait of anguish. I never meant to hurt you like this. I was just lost. We all make choices, and we have to live with the consequences, I replied, my voice firmer than I felt. The call ended with her in tears and me in a state of emotional exhaustion. I turned off my phone, not wanting any more intrusions into the life I had painstakingly rebuilt. James found me sitting at the kitchen table, my head in my hands. Are you okay? He asked, concern etched on his face. I looked up at him, grateful for his presence. It was my sister. She's trying to guilt me into helping them. He sat down beside me, taking my hands in his. You don't owe her anything. You've suffered enough because of her actions. It's okay to think of yourself. I nodded, drawing strength from his words. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized that my sister's pleas had only strengthened my resolve. I had moved on, and I couldn't let the ghosts of my past disrupt the life I had so carefully built. The decision to stay away from her was not just a choice, but a necessity for my own well-being and for the sake of my family. My decision not to help my sister and her family was met with mixed reactions from my relatives. Some understood my stance, but others, particularly my extended family, viewed it as heartless. The subject came up during a family gathering at my parents' house, a setting that once felt like a refuge, but now seemed more like a battleground. As we sat around the dinner table, my aunt, always one to speak her mind, broached the topic. I can't believe you're turning your back on your own niece and nephew. They're just children, she said. I felt all eyes on me, the weight of their judgment heavy in the air. It's not a decision I made lightly, I started, trying to keep my voice calm. But there's a lot of history there that can't be ignored. But they are innocent in all of this, my uncle chimed in. Shouldn't they be spared from the sins of their parents? I understand that, and I sympathize with them, but being involved with my sister again, even indirectly, is something I can't handle. It's a boundary I've set for my own well-being, I explained. My mother, always the peacemaker, tried to soften the atmosphere. Let's not forget what she went through. This isn't an easy situation for anyone. The conversation shifted, but the tension lingered. Later, in the kitchen, my cousin approached me. I get that you're hurt, but don't you think this grudge has gone on long enough? She's family, after all. I leaned against the counter, feeling a familiar frustration rise within me. It's not just a grudge. What she did changed everything. I've moved on, and I can't go back to that dark place again. My cousin shrugged, a clear sign of disagreement, and walked away. As James and I drove home that night, the silence in the car was a stark contrast to the cacophony of the family dinner. He finally broke the silence. Your family means well, but they don't fully understand what you went through, and that's okay. You don't have to justify your feelings to anyone. His words were a balm, soothing the sting of the evening's events. I realized then that family isn't just about blood relations, it's about who stands by you, understands your pain, and respects your decisions. James was my family, and with him, I had found a haven of understanding and acceptance. The backlash from my relatives was just noise compared to the symphony of support I had in him. The aftermath of the family gathering left me in a contemplative mood. I found solace in the nursery, watching my children sleep peacefully, unaware of the complexities of adult relationships. James joined me, wrapping his arm around my shoulder. You've been quiet since we got back, he observed softly. I sighed, leaning into his embrace. It's just, everyone thinks I'm being unreasonable, but they don't understand how deep the hurt goes. They might never fully understand, and that's okay. You have every right to protect yourself and our family, he reassured me. His words reminded me of the safe haven we had built together, yet the family's words echoed in my mind, stirring a whirlpool of doubt and guilt. A few days later, I found myself at my parents' house, helping my mom with some chores. She seized a quiet moment to speak her mind. You know, your sister called me crying the other day, she said, her voice tinged with concern. I paused, the dishcloth in my hand momentarily still. Mama, she's really struggling, and those kids. My mom's voice trailed off, laden with unspoken pleas. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I know it's hard, Mom, but I have to think about my mental health too. Being around her, even indirectly, would bring back a lot of pain. My mom reached out, touching my hand gently. I understand, dear. I just wish things were different. So do I, Mom. So do I whispered, feeling a familiar ache in my heart. That conversation with my mom stayed with me for days. It wasn't just about making a choice, it was about standing by it, even when it was questioned by those closest to me. One evening, while putting the kids to bed, my eldest asked, Mommy, why don't we ever see Auntie? Her question caught me off guard. Well, honey, sometimes people have disagreements, and it's better for them to stay apart. Like when I don't want to play with Tommy because he took my toy, she asked. Something like that, I replied, packing her in. Lying in bed later that night, I thought about my daughter's innocent question. My decision not only affected me, but also shaped the perception of my children. It was a sobering thought, but I knew I had to stand my ground for the sake of my own well-being and for the healthy environment I wanted for my children. They deserved a mother who was whole, not fragmented by the ghosts of her past. As days turned into weeks, the initial storm of family opinions gradually settled into a quiet but persistent hum in the background of our lives. Despite the support from James and the joy our children brought, there were moments when doubt crept in, whispering what-ifs and could-have-beens. One such evening, while the kids were at a sleepover and James and I were enjoying a quiet dinner, he broached the subject that had been lingering in the air. You've been distant lately. Is it about your sister again? He asked, his eyes reflecting a mix of concern and understanding. I put down my fork, the truth spilling out. Part of me wonders if I'm being too harsh. But then I remember the pain, the betrayal, and I just can't bring myself to face her, not even for the sake of her kids. James reached across the table, taking my hand. It's okay to have these feelings, you're human. But don't forget, you make this decision for valid reasons. Your peace of mind is important too. I nodded, grateful for his unwavering support. I know, it's just hard when your own family questions your choices. We can't control what others think or feel, but we can control how we react and how we let it affect us and our family, he said gently. His words were a reminder of the strength I had found in myself and in our life together. The path I had chosen was not an easy one, but it prioritized my healing and the well-being of the family James and I had built. A few days later, during a phone call with my dad, he hesitantly mentioned my sister again. I just thought you should know. Your sister's been asking about you. She's worried, despite everything, he said softly. I felt a twinge in my heart, but my resolve remained strong. Tell her I'm fine, Dad, but that's all. Please, I don't want any more messages or updates. After hanging up the phone, I realized that while the past would always be a part of me, it did not define me. My choices, difficult as they were, had led me to a place of growth and newfound strength. I had learned to prioritize my own well-being and that of my immediate family. Though the future was uncertain and the path to forgiveness unclear, I found comfort in the love and stability that surrounded me now. Months had passed since I last heard from my sister. Life with James and our children continued to be a source of joy and stability. Yet the echoes of the past still resonated, a reminder of the journey I had been on. One sunny afternoon, while watching the kids play in the backyard, James joined me with 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one and smiled. You seem more at peace these days, he remarked. I took a sip, feeling the warmth of the coffee and his presence. I am. It's been a journey, but I think I'm finally learning to let go of the past. That's good to hear. You know, no matter what, I'm proud of how you've handled everything, he said, his eyes full of admiration. I leaned against him, grateful for his unwavering support. Thanks, James. I couldn't have done it without you. As we sat in comfortable silence, I reflected on the changes within me. The bitterness and pain had faded, replaced by a sense of acceptance and inner peace. It wasn't about forgetting the past, but about choosing not to let it control my present and future. Later that week, while sorting through some old boxes, I came across a photo of my sister and me in our younger days. For the first time in a long while, I looked at it without the sting of betrayal. Instead, there was a recognition of the bond we once shared and an acknowledgement of the separate paths we had taken. That evening, as James and I put the kids to bed, our youngest asked, Mommy, do you have a sister? I paused, tucking her in. Yes, honey, I do. But sometimes, even with family, people grow apart. Will you ever see her again? She asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. I kissed her forehead, a bittersweet smile on my lips. Maybe one day, sweetie. But for now, we have our own happy little family, and that's what matters. As I turned off the lights, I realized how far I had come. The journey through pain and betrayal had led me to a place of strength and resilience. My family, James, and our children were my anchor, my source of unconditional love and support. Lying in bed that night, I felt a sense of closure. The chapter of my life involving my sister would always be a part of my story, but it no longer defined me. I had moved forward, not just moved on, and in doing so, I had found a deeper understanding of myself and what truly mattered in life. My heart was at peace, knowing that the future held promise and hope, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next with my loving family by my side. My brother is dead, and here you are thinking about such things. I can't believe it. I can't stay with you anymore. My husband Jaden shouted at me during the funeral, but I knew he was just hiding his true intentions. His body carried the scent of a perfume, the same one his late brother's wife always wore. I want a divorce. Divorce me immediately. Okay, let's get a divorce then. For a moment, my husband was stunned. He couldn't believe I accepted so easily, but then he started to grin, as if he thought he could now be happy with his late brother's wife, free from me. But it won't be that easy. I whispered those words so quietly that no one could hear. My name is Stella. I live with my husband Jaden and my mother-in-law. My parents have already passed away, and I have no siblings. My mother-in-law welcomed me warmly as if I were her own daughter. I was overjoyed to finally have a family after spending so much time alone and depressed. with no one to lean on. I loved and deeply appreciated her. Jaden had a younger brother, Bobby, who was married to a young woman. They lived near my in-laws. When I joined the family, Bobby welcomed me with the same kindness as my mother-in-law. We lived close to each other, and our families often traveled together. I was happy with my new life, but those happy days were coming to an end. One day, Bobby was rushed to the emergency room. I left work immediately and hurried to the hospital. In the hospital room, I found my mother-in-law crying. I sat by her side and asked about his condition. He seemed to have passed the critical stage, but the doctor said it was still too early to tell. I held my mother-in-law's shoulder, comforting her as best I could. Still, there was no sign of my husband or Bobby's wife. I wished they would arrive soon because my mother-in-law needed them too. Jaden was on an urgent business trip but was on his way to the hospital now. My mother-in-law was distressed, unable to reach Bobby's wife, Karen. I wondered if there was any way to contact her, but there was nothing we could do but wait. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly. Finally, we heard footsteps approaching the hospital room. It was my husband, and with him was Karen. He explained that he had brought her to the hospital. I was relieved that they were finally there. But then, I felt something off. My husband, he smelled different. Was he wearing perfume? The scent was familiar. I looked over and saw Karen holding my brother-in-law's hand. A few days later, Bobby passed away. The wake and the funeral went by without incident, and things settled down somewhat. I noticed that Jaden was taking care of Karen with unusual attentiveness. Of course, she must be in more pain than anyone, having lost her husband, and surely she needed emotional support. But they seemed closer than necessary, even enjoying each other's company. I began to doubt their relationship, feeling guilty for my suspicions. Maybe I was just looking at things the wrong way. After all, it was better for Karen to be happy than to be depressed. So I tried to push those thoughts aside. But perhaps I should have paid more attention. Not long after, Jaden dropped a shocking revelation on me. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice serious. I was folding laundry at the time. I stopped and turned to face him, sensing the weight of what he was about to say. "Ever since my brother passed away, there's been something missing in me," he confessed. "It's a wound that won't heal, not even when I'm with you." I was shocked, to be honest. I thought I was taking care of my husband in my own way, trying to offer him the same support that my mother-in-law had given me. But it clearly wasn't enough. It hadn't been long since my brother-in-law passed away, and I was trying hard not to show how upset I was. I nodded along, listening to the rest of what Jaden had to say. "But I've met someone who fills that emptiness," he continued. My heart sank as I braced myself for his next words. "It's Karen, Bobby's wife. She's grieving too, and we found comfort in each other. There are some voids that only those who've lost someone can fill." His words were like a dagger to my heart. I tried to deny what I was hearing, to push away the rising panic. "The love of my life is Karen," he confessed. "We just met in the wrong order. Please divorce me." My head spun. What the hell was he talking about? My mind raced back to the hospital, to the moment they had shown up together, both smelling of the same perfume. "Karen is my destiny," he insisted. "I know that now." I felt a wave of disbelief and betrayal wash over me. "You've been planning this for a long time, haven't you?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. "What do you mean?" he snapped. "Are you accusing me of having an affair?" I was taken aback by the coldness in his voice, but I couldn't stop myself from explaining what had been gnawing at me: the perfume, the way he took care of her, how close they had become. The more I talked, the more I laid out the evidence of his infidelity. Jaden's mood darkened, his anger flaring. "We're still grieving, and you're talking about this? I can't believe it. I can't be with you anymore." With those words, he walked away. As I watched his back disappear, the full weight of what he had said crashed down on me. He had just told me that I was not his life partner, and the shock and pain hit me all at once. All I could do was cry. The pain was unbearable, and I felt like I had to do something, anything to keep myself from falling apart. I reached for Bobby's belongings. He had loved photography and kept a meticulously organized album of his photos. I opened it, flipping through pictures of us on trips together. The happiness captured in those photos felt like a distant memory, and I feared I had destroyed any chance of reclaiming it. As I turned the pages, something slipped out from between them, an envelope. A few days later, Jaden and I finalized our divorce. When my mother-in-law learned about Jaden's intentions and the divorce, she broke down in tears and apologized to me. "I'm so sorry for my foolish son," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I know you'll find happiness, Stella. Even though we're no longer in the same family, you and I will always be family. If you ever need anything, please call me immediately." She had always been good to me, and she had nothing to apologize for. It broke my heart to see such a kind woman cry, and leaving her behind was the hardest part of all. After I moved out of my parents-in-law's house and started living alone, I was overwhelmed by a sense of loneliness. It wasn't the first time I'd lived alone. I had done so before marriage, but this time, the solitude felt almost unbearable. However, that loneliness didn't last long. 2 months later, I received a call from my mother-in-law. She told me that my ex-husband and Karen had moved out, leaving her alone in a house that now felt too big and empty. She was thinking about selling the house and starting a new life on her own. But moving away would mean leaving behind the neighborhood and the friends she could rely on. Her voice was tinged with sadness when she asked if it would be all right for her to move closer to me. Hearing the loneliness in her voice, I suggested something I expected. We should move in together. At first she was hesitant, not wanting to impose. But I couldn't bear the thought of her being alone, and eventually I convinced her. In the end, we built an apartment and moved in together. Since then, we've grown closer, more like mother and daughter than ever before. Our days together were peaceful and life seemed to be moving forward. But then, one day, I received a call from an unknown number. To my surprise, it was Karen. "What do you want after all these years?" I asked, bracing myself. "How come the house is gone? And what's this about you being adopted?" She shouted, her voice sharp and accusing. I felt my heart skip a beat at her sudden outburst. The house my mother-in-law sold had been replaced by a new building, which was to be expected. As for the adoption, it was something my mother-in-law had suggested when we decided to move in together. She wanted us to be a real family, and I had agreed. But Karen's tone made it clear that she was upset, perhaps even resentful. I began to suspect that she had been after Bobby's inheritance all along. The inheritance that my mother-in-law had now passed on to me. The thought that Karen might have married my ex-husband for Bobby's money crossed my mind more than once. Realizing the time had come to address this, I spoke firmly. "You have no right to tell me what to do. We're not family anymore, and you should be grateful I didn't ask for alimony for the affair, but if you push me, I will." Karen seemed taken aback, but quickly recovered, her voice laced with venom. "You accused Jaden of adultery even before we were together. You made him want to leave you. You should be ashamed of yourself." I scoffed, her response so predictable that I couldn't help but counter it with a touch of sarcasm. "What if I told you I have proof?" Silence fell on the other end of the line. I had found the letter, the one that had slipped out of Bobby's photo album the day my husband left me. The letter was filled with Bobby's bitterness and pain. "The doctor told me I don't have much time," the letter began. "By the time you read this, I won't be around anymore. This letter contains hidden evidence of my wife's affair with Jaden. If Jaden or Karen finds this letter, they can destroy it all, and I will have failed miserably. But if you, Stella, find this letter, let my wife and my brother be punished for what they deserve." The silence on the phone was deafening. I knew Karen had no comeback for this. My brother-in-law's letter also revealed his deep feelings about his wife, Karen. He wrote about how, after we got married, Karen quit her job and seemed to think it was his responsibility to make her happy. She just sat around the house, doing nothing. When he suggested they should help each other out more, she got upset. There were days when she shut him out completely, especially when she felt he wasn't earning enough money. He confessed that it was hard for him to accept how much he had changed. He tried to work harder, hoping that if he made her life easier, she might return to the person he once loved. But in the end, he realized that the woman she had become was her true self all along. He felt ashamed that he hadn't seen it sooner. "If Jaden and Karen hadn't gotten involved," he wrote, "I wouldn't have tried to make things worse. But I can't let her misdeeds go any further. I have to take action for my late brother-in-law. I'll destroy them both." Bobby had seen through Karen a long time ago and had gathered all the evidence. Now it was up to me to carry out his wish. I could almost hear Karen shaking on the other end of the line, trying to sound strong, but her voice trembled. "There's no way you can ask for alimony now that we're married," she spat. "That's a bluff. You're just trying to scare me, but it's not going to work. I'll sue you for blackmail. Be my guest. I replied calmly. But remember, paying for a lawyer costs a lot. You might think it's a waste of money, but I'm prepared. You seem to have studied the division of property, but you overlooked adultery. So knave. You thought Bobby didn't know anything, didn't you? Karen hung up violently. Later, I filed a claim for alimony against my ex-husband and his new wife through a lawyer. After a while, my ex-husband reached out to my mother. Apparently, he wanted to leave Karen and live with her again. Karen's true nature, combined with her anger over the alimony charges, had made her unbearable to live with. My ex-husband's voice on the phone was so tired, it was hard to believe they were newlyweds. Like my late brother-in-law, he had failed to see Karen's true nature. It's amazing what blood can do to you, my mother remarked as she sat next to me, listening to the phone conversation. Come on, Mom, I didn't know she was like that, my ex-husband pleaded. I can't live with her anymore. I just want to be with you and Stella again. What the hell? My mother snapped. You're the one who said she was the one and left Stella. I won't allow a man who hurt my daughter to live with us. If you're really sorry, you'll first pay the alimony. If you do anything to me or Stella, I'll call the police. No, Mom, please, he begged, his voice pathetic. Despite his pleas, my mother couldn't forgive him. But she did offer him a final act of mercy. If you really can't pay the alimony, she said, I'll pay it for you. But in exchange, you must forego all inheritance after my death and never appear in front of us again. He had no choice but to accept. We never heard from him or Karen again. My mother and I continued to live together, finding joy in each other's company. We celebrated our happy moments, comforted each other in our sadness, and even strengthened our bond by working through our disagreements. Bobby, I thought to myself, I've avenged you. Although Bobby and I are no longer connected by blood, the bond I share with my mother is stronger than ever. We'll continue to live happily together as a family.